Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to begin in the 18th verse of the 8th chapter of Romans. But before we do that, we're just going to review without reciting the previous verses in the chapters. Now it opens, Paul gives words of comfort and hope to any seeker of salvation in the opening verse when he declares that there is no condemnation for those who are in Messiah. And this is at stark contrast with the legalists who are in for a rude awakening when they invest their salvation on their honoring of the law, because by the very law they rested in, they will be condemned. But he assures them that there is no condemnation for those who are in Messiah. He is our advocate, and he is our ticket to salvation. Then he proceeds with the spirit, the battle between the spirit and the flesh, which wars within us all. He defines it as a life or death consequences of it. And he closes by saying that the Spirit is a signal of our adoption. Now, the 18th verse is a source for encouragement whilst enduring. So he writes, "For I reckon that the sufferings of the present time are not worth comparing with the esteem that is to be revealed in us." So even though they have nothing to sing about or brag about or praise about at the moment, they can still praise, and with the hopeful expectation, the eternal expectation which they await. So everything they experience in life, it's all going to end one day, and it's all going to be meaningless to their eternal ecstasy. "For the intense longing of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of Elohim." Now, he had earlier signified those who live by the Spirit as their adoption into the family of Elohim. And creation is groaning because when Adam sinned, he threw the entire natural order into disequilibrium. So the verses which come next are really an encapsulation of redemptive history. From its corruption, it's going to be restored to its pristine state. "For the creation was subjected to futility, not from choice, but because of him who subjected it in anticipation." So the purpose Adam sinned was very much divine orchestrated. It was a necessary but painful development in his plan of redemptive history. He created us with the capacity of sin to sin, and he will redeem us in our pristine, sinless state. "That the creation itself also shall be saved from the bondage to corruption into the esteemed freedom of the children of Elohim." So the new heaven and new earth, not only do we witness the restoration and resurrection of ourself and the improvement of our bodies, but all of nature and creation shares in that exaltation with us. So we are surrounded by everything in its pristine and most pure forms, and they're most perfect. "For we know that all creation groans together and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now." So he's comparing the sin that stains the creation as causing the creation to groan, because its creator naturally feels pain whenever there's something not done according to his will, and it suffers from the pains of childbirth. Now, childbirth is initially a very painful experience. There's nothing quite like it comparable to an ordinary experience by most humans. But the blessed joy awaits after that moment of pain, which ties us into the 18th verse and also John 16:21. "And not only so, but even we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, we ourselves also groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoptions as sons, the redemption of our body." So the first fruits of the resurrection was... or of the Spirit, he identified the saints as they were the first generation, and they empathized with the groaning creation. They suffered from its deleterious consequences too, and this was a source of consternation for them. So they did not see the world around them with benign neglect, and they suffered with it, but they are eagerly awaiting a better life and salvation from the sin-stained world. "For in this hope we were saved, but hope that is not seen is not hope. For when anyone sees, does he expect it?" So even though everything they can see around them is deteriorating and corrupting, They exercise hope in something they can't see, which will liberate them from everything they can see. And the invisible essence of Christian faith is invested in a Savior who we knew came, but we cannot see, at least not yet. And it's not hope if you can see it. So just if you could see it, that eliminates the challenge of faith. But there is enough hope for us to lay hold of that which is invisible. And if we hope what we do not see, we eagerly await for it with endurance. Now, endurance by the verb, it demands a full-scale investment of all your mental, bodily, spiritual faculties and all their capacities. So enduring is not a passive verb. It's very much action-oriented. We are called to we not only have the promise of the kingdom to come, but we are to endeavor in as much as we are able to bring the kingdom on the earth, to plant the flag and lay the beachhead so that we can claim the promise. And in the same way, the Spirit helps in our weaknesses. For we do not know what we should pray, but the Spirit himself pleads our case for us with groanings unutterable. So the common dilemma frequent amongst most prayers is not knowing what to say, but here he has the assurance that the Spirit, if they just lean on him, he will tell them what to say. And the Messiah said something similar to the disciples, warning them that they would be brought before Gentile rulers to give the testimony of me, and to don't even worry what you have to say, because the Spirit will guide you with what to say, and he'll put the words in your mouth that will make for an effective witness, and in most cases alleviate their execution. And he who searches the hearts knows what the mind of the Spirit is, because he makes intercessions for the saints according to Elohim. So the interceding one is the Spirit, who, and now in an interceding capacity, they act as a mediator between divinity and humanity, but divinity is a directly divine manifestation which connects us to the Father, who searches the hearts and knows the mind of the Spirit. And we know that all works together for good to those who love Elohim, to those who are called according to purpose. So this ought not be interpreted as a blank slate for blessings and pleasure, but the hope we can claim, the good that we can count on and invest in and believe in, will manifest, if not in this lifetime, certainly during the next. This is not a red light to all persecutors that they are not to persecute us, because we will endure persecution in this life, but none in the world to come if we endure it faithfully and unbegrudgingly. Because those he knew beforehand, he also ordained beforehand to be conformed to the likeness of his Son, that he became the firstborn among many brothers. This is the theological doctrine of predestination, whereby we were selected in advance of our birth. For the salvation, we were elected to choose him and respond to his salvific invitation. And so, in some sense, we have to now if anyone interprets moral agency or predestination to the extreme, which excludes the supplementary counterpart, then they miss the message and distort the puzzle. But we do have the promise that we will conform to the image or likeness of his Son, and we will become the firstborn among many brothers. And in whom he ordained beforehand, these he also called, and whom he called, he also justified, and whom he justified, these he also esteemed. So this is, again, predestination. We were not only called, but chosen, and to be justified. That's a theological term for declared innocent at the judgment, and it's nothing that we do ourselves that declares us innocent at the judgment. The only thing we contribute to our salvation is the sin which we are being saved from. What then shall we say to this? If Elohim is for us, who is against us? So the size of an army is no relation to Yahweh's or Elohim's ability to defeat it. I believe 1 Samuel 14:6, Jonathan gives utterance to the principle. And when we abide and belong to Elohim, no power on earth can take that from us or deprive us of our blessings and promises. Truly, he who did not spare his own son, but delivered him up on behalf of us all, how shall he not, along with him, freely give us all else? So if he gave his son at profound personal cost to himself, it was for a reason, and that was that we may share in his exaltation and be united with divinity in heaven. Who shall bring any charge against Elohim's chosen one? It is Elohim who is justifying. So any punishment or crime we're charged with on earth will not be registered in Elohim's and judgment, and because he's the one who alone can justify it. So any secular authority who persecutes us in the midst of our faith is of no lasting consequence in our existence. Who is he who is condemning? It is the Messiah who died, and furthermore it is also raised up, who is also at the right hand of Yahweh, who makes intercessions for us. So he already declared in the opening verse of this chapter that those who are in Messiah have no condemnation because he died for us. He purchased our salvation with his precious blood, and he was resurrected, and the gift is that we can share in the resurrection. And he's constantly making intercessions before us. He's our advocate. He connects us communicatively to the Father. He hears our case and hears our pleas and advocates for us against the Father's wrath. Who shall separate us from the love of the Messiah? Shall pressure or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or word? So these are rhetorical questions, which he's eventually going to expose the rhetorical nature of the question by essentially suggesting that none of these, as powerful as they may seem, none of them are powerful enough to separate us from the love of the Messiah, which is intrinsic and impregnable and incorruptible, unlike anything they can hurl against us. So nothing the earth or the principalities, the governing humans that they can throw about us can ultimately separate us from the love of Elohim, which has salvific significance for us. As it is written, for your sake we are killed all day long, we are reckoned as sheep for slaughter, but in all this we are more than overcomers through him who loved us. So the sheep for slaughter indicates a sacrifice of some sorts, but they were called to be living sacrifices all day long. Now in Romans 12:1, he more extensively extrapolates on the demands of a living sacrifice, but this was the new covenant, which signaled the transition from the old covenant, according to which animal sacrifices were the atoning exercise, whereas we are called to be living sacrifices, and we shall overcome. Now, in the world we will have tribulation, but take good comfort, for the Messiah has overcome the world, and he loves us and wants us to share in his victory and become overcomers with him. For I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels nor principalities, nor powers, neither the present nor the future, nor height nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of Yahweh, which is in the Messiah, our Master. Yahshua Messiah, our Master. So there is no depth or demotion of anything that anyone from anywhere in any part of the universe can hurl against us that will separate us from the love we are called to, which calls us home to our heavenly homeland. So the moral of the story is that this ties in all the way. It connects to the opening passage, the 18th verse, that the sufferings of the present age are meaningless in the eternal scheme of things, and we do have hope that we can count on and bask in and claim and spread. And that concludes today's lesson. Thank you so much. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.